Hello viewers, welcome to this video. Hope you're all doing good. Alright, so in this video we will be looking at a way of provisioning Kubernetes cluster using a tool called K3s from Rancher. So it's a lightweight Kubernetes distribution, and you can even install this. You can set up and run this on a Raspberry Pi actually. So it's not lightweight. It requires less amount of memory, CPU resources, and so on. There are certain features that are not included in this lightweight distribution, but most of the things that you need for your development purpose should be here. The thing to note here is when you deploy K3s, we will be downloading K3s or set up K3s on the individual machines. So for this demo, we are going to be creating a 2-node cluster with one master node and one worker node. So I will be creating 2 virtual machines. I've got my Vagrant file, which I'll show you in a minute. So this is tested in Ubuntu 18.04, but it doesn't matter what Linux distribution you've got. It should work equally well in all the Linux distributions. And the default overlay network that comes with K3s is Flannel. And one important thing is to keep this lightweight. We're not using etcd as the data store, although you can use etcd by default when you deploy K3s cluster, a Kubernetes cluster using K3s. By default, the data will be stored in a SQLite database and not in an etcd database. Okay, but there are provisions to use etcd as the database, and again, we will be deploying a single master node and a single worker node. There is no high availability, but if you want, we can have a high availability setup as well using K3s. So you can deploy multiple master node and an external database as the cluster storage, and with load balancer and so on. But for this video, for this demonstration purpose, we are going to go with a single master node and single worker node. All right, so I'm in my play directory here. I'm going to git clone my Vagrant GitHub repository. So git clone just me an open source Vagrant. Okay, I'll put a link to the GitHub repo in the video description if you want it. Cd to Vagrant files, Ubuntu 18. Okay, I've got my Vagrant file here and I'm going to edit that. So by default, this Vagrant file will deploy 1 machine, but I need 2 machines. So I'm going to change the node count variable to 2. And you can see I'm using Ubuntu Bionic 64, which is Ubuntu 18.04. And the machines will be named Ubuntu VM01, Ubuntu VM02, because we are deploying 2 virtual machines, and I'm giving it a private network as well. So 172.42.42.101 for the first virtual machine, 102 for the second virtual machine. So as this is a very lightweight Kubernetes cluster, we don't need 2 gig of memory. I'm just going to change that to 1 gig of memory and 1 CPU. All right. So let's bring these machines up. Vagrant up. Alright, so Vagrant up command completed, and now we can log into the machines. Vagrant SSH Ubuntu VM01. I'm also going to open another terminal and cd to play Vagrant files Ubuntu 18, Vagrant SSH Ubuntu VM02. Okay, so we are logged into these 2 machines. One thing to note is we need to be logged in as root user because K3s requires you to be root in order to run all the commands that I'm going to show you. Okay, so sudo so we are logged in as root user. So now how do we install K3s and how do we start the services? Okay, let me launch the browser and look for the installation instructions. K3s installation, and if we go to the rancher.com documentation, installation and configuration options. So first we are going to set up our master node, and then we will come to adding it to our worker node. So all you need is just this command here, copy and paste it. But before running this, we need to think about few things. If you're running it on a physical machine or on any machine which has just one network interface, then that's fine. All you need is just this command, and that will set up a systemd service called K3s, and it will start the service. All right. But since we are running this on a virtual machine started using Vagrant, and when I showed you my Vagrant file, you've noticed that I've added a second network interface. So by default, K3s sets you with the flannel network. So the flannel network takes whatever the first interface is to set up the cluster networking. So in our case, if I show you the list of interfaces, so that's the first real interface, ENP0S3, which has got an IP address 10.02.15. And even here on the second virtual machine, if I show you, it's again the same IP address 10.0.2.15. So this IP address is used internally. So when you do Vagrant SSH to this machine, so for those internal things, this IP address is used. So that's the first Ethernet address. So we need to make sure that we are using the second IP address. So ENP0S8, so 172.42.42.102, and here it's 172.42.42.101. So since we are using VirtualBox and since we want to use the second Ethernet interface instead of the first available interface, we need to pass extra arguments to this command here. Okay, so let's do that. Let's copy this command first, Control C. And we are setting up on the master machine first. So what we need to do is I'm going to use this command here, install K3s_exec. Copy that, and before running the sh command, before the sh command, paste that. And I don't need this browser anymore. But let me show you what I will be using here. So I will be using flannel interface -- flannel interface to tell which interface I want to use for the cluster networking, and then we will be using -- node IP. So that tells which IP we will be advertising, IP address to advertise for node. So only if you use the right IP address. If you don't use it, it's going to use the first Ethernet interface's IP address, which is not going to work because these two machines has got the same IP address for their first interface, right? So we need to pass these two arguments, node IP and flannel iface. Okay, so close that, and for this option, install _K3s_exec, and I'm going to pass those options, -- node IP equals the IP address of this master node, which is 172.42.42.101 space -- flannel iface equals the Ethernet interface that we want to use for our cluster networking, which is ENP0S8. All right, so that's all it's needed. That's it. I'm gonna hit enter, and it will take about anywhere between 30 seconds to 1 minute for the cluster to be up and running. Alright, the command completed, and you can see here it has started the systemd service called K3s, and it's trying to find the latest Kubernetes release supported by this K3s, which is 1.17.4. It downloads and installs everything here. Okay, so it has also installed a few other scripts. One of them is K3s kill all K3s uninstall.shell under user local bin. If you want to remove this cluster from this node, you can use these scripts. Okay, so systemctl status K3s. So our K3s service is running, and it says it's lightweight Kubernetes, and the service is enabled. You don't have to enable it. So whenever you restart the machine, the service will come up, and if you want to continuously look out for the logs, you can use journalctl -f -- unit K3s. So that's the log from the K3s service. Okay, so there are no requirements absolutely before you start installing the K3s, or before you start to provision your cluster using K3s. You don't actually need to install any prerequisites. I started with a very clean blank Ubuntu VM. You don't need Docker because it's using containerd as the container runtime. So absolutely there is no requirement. You just need the Linux kernel and C groups, that's it. So everything will be taken care by K3s. Okay, so which kubectl? It has also installed kubectl for us. And there are two directories you need to be aware of. Var lib rancher, so that's one directory. etc rancher. So before installing K3s, you wouldn't have had these directories. So these two are the directories where it stores the data. And if you look at var lib rancher K3s, so you have directory for the agents, for the data, for the server, and so on. Okay, so data that's the directory where it stores the cluster state in a SQLite database. Data, so bin etc, and if you look at var lib rancher K3s server, so sorry, it's in the db directory here, and you have the token here, which is that one. So that's the token. If you want to add additional worker nodes to this cluster, you should be using this token. So we will be needing this token when we come to installing K3s in this machine, Ubuntu VM02. Okay, so that's running. So where is our kubeconfig file? Will we be able to access the Kubernetes cluster? Let's try kubectl get nodes. Yep, we can access it. It's Ubuntu VM01. It's the master machine running version 1.17.4. kubectl cluster info. Yep, we've got core DNS. We've also got metric server, kubectl version --short. Version 1.17.4. Client version is also 1.17.4. So as part of the installation, it has also created kubectl for us. So if you want to access this cluster from outside, so at the moment we are logged into the master node and we are using the kubectl command. But if you want to access this cluster, Kubernetes cluster, from any other machine in the same network, you need the kubeconfig file, which is in etc rancher k3s.yaml. So that's the file you need to copy. All right. So one other thing I wanted to mention is, if you look at the permissions of this file, etc rancher k3s.yaml, it's 600 owned by root. So no other user will be able to read this file. So if I exit out of the root shell, so now I'm the vagrant user. If I try to run kubectl any commands, it says etc rancher k3s.yaml, which is the kubeconfig file, cannot be read, permission denied. So what you need to do is change the permission. So that's the configuration file, kubeconfig file. Just change mode to 644 and then exit out. And if you do kubectl get nodes, cool. So now you are able to access it. So one thing I wanted to show you also, when you are running that K3s command for the first time, you don't have to do this command, change mod C644, and change the permission of the kubeconfig file. So when we were installing the K3s, the command, so that's the command we used for the installation. So you can add additional option, which is --write -kubeconfig -mode equals 644. So that's an extra option which you can use, so that you don't have to do this manually. All right, but so this is inside your master machine. If you want to access it from outside the master machine, say for example, let me log out and I'm on my host machine here, and if I want to access the cluster from my host machine, I need a copy of that kubeconfig file. So let me first copy that file, copy etc rancher k3s.yaml to /temp. So within the same machine, I'm copying it under /temp directory. Okay, so from here, since I'm using vagrant, I can use vagrant scp command to copy any file between the host and the guest machine. So I've got vagrant scp plugin installed, so I can use vagrant scp command, Ubuntu VM01, so that's the master machine, and I'm going to copy k3s.yaml to my kube directory as config file, which is the default kubeconfig file. Okay, so once that's copied, so now I should be able to run the commands kubectl, but it won't work. I will show you why. Kubectl get nodes doesn't work. So if you take a look at the config file that we just copied, vi.kube config. And if you look at the server here, it's pointing to 127.0.0.1, which is clearly not the place where the API server is running. API server is running on this virtual machine, Ubuntu VM01. So just change the IP address to the IP address of our master machine, 42.42.101. Save that. Now you should be able to run all the kubectl commands. Cool. So that's how you access your cluster from any machine that's on the same network. You just copy that kubeconfig file. All right. Cool. Okay. So what else we've got? If you look, kubectl -n kube system get all. You can see here it has got metric server that's running, core DNS, traffic. It has also got the ingress controller installed, local path provisioner. You can start using PVC, PV persistent volume and volume claims, traffic Prometheus. Okay, so it has got all the things that we need. And if I do kubectl get storage class, so local path default storage class, that's running fine. Okay, so what else? So let's start setting up the worker node. So we've got a cluster now, K3s cluster, in our master machine with one master node. So now we are going to set this up on a worker node, Vagrant SSH Ubuntu VM02, and we are going to be using the same command here as well. Okay, so if I look at the command that we used, yep, so that's the command we used. I'm going to copy the same command, but we need to pass in some additional options here. Control C, Control V. Okay, so it's exactly the same command that we used on our master machine when we were setting up our master machine, but there are a few things that we need to add. So the first thing obviously is to change the IP address of the worker node, which is for Ubuntu VM02, it's 172.42.42.102. And the other two options that I'm going to add before the sh command is K3s _URL equals. So we need to tell which cluster we are joining this node to. So the cluster is https://172.42.42.101:6443, right? So that's the cluster IP address. So here, if you do kubectl cluster info, so that's the one, but instead of 127.0.0.1, we are using the IP address of the master node. So 172.42.42.101:6443. So that's the K3s URL. So that's the cluster we are going to join this worker node to. So in order to join a worker node, this worker node needs to authenticate to the cluster. So the way we authenticate is using the token. So we've got the token here, var lib rancher K3s server token, as I showed you earlier. So that's the file that contains the token that we need to use while joining any worker nodes. So now I'm just showing you an example of one worker node. The process to add additional worker nodes is just going to be the same. And copy that token, Control C. Okay, back in here. Okay, back in the machine, let's do watch -n kubectl get nodes. Let's keep an eye. So once we run this command, after a while, we will see the additional node, the worker node, getting added to the cluster. Okay, we've copied the token, and the option we are going to use is K3s _token equals. Paste the token. Okay, so that's all we need. That's it. I'm going to hit enter. Alright, so the command completed, and you can see Ubuntu VM02 now added. It's not the master node, it's one of the worker node, same Kubernetes version. And on the worker node, the systemd service is called K3s agent. Okay, so systemctl status K3s agent, and you can see it's active running and it's enabled by default. And again, if you want to look at the logs, it's journalctl --unit K3s agent. Okay, so we have the logs here, and we've added that to here. Okay, cool. So now, which kubectl? You have the kubectl here, but if you want to use kubectl, you need the kube config file. So you can always get the kube config file from the master machine and place it here, and then you can start using your cluster. But don't forget to change the server address in your kube config file. Okay, so I'm exiting out of the worker node into my host machine now. So let's try and deploy a service. Okay, so kubectl get all, we don't have anything. Kubectl run nginx --image nginx, kubectl get all. Okay, so the container is getting created. We are just deploying a sample nginx application. We'll then try and expose it as a service and then see if we can access that service. Kubectl get all. Okay, so nginx service is running. Let's try and expose it. Kubectl, let's try and expose it as a node port service. Kubectl expose deploy nginx port --, type node port kubectl get service. Okay, so that's nginx and it's running on port 32048. Let's copy that and let's use W3M, which is a terminal based browser. HTTP 172.42.42.102 node port. Okay, cool. Welcome to nginx. We can see our nginx page. That's cool. Okay, so so that's how you normally install K3s. It's very lightweight, and you can also install this on a Raspberry Pi. It's that lightweight, and you can add additional nodes. Adding nodes is similar to what I've just shown you here. And let me log in back to Ubuntu VMO2. Let's try and delete this, tidy up this cluster. So user local bin K3s agent uninstall.shell script. If you want to completely remove the installation, K3s installation on your worker nodes, just run this command. Everything is gone, but I think you will still have the directory, but they will be empty. Var lib rancher. Yep, so we do have the directory. The directory itself is not deleted, but all the contents have been deleted. So we can do rm-rf var lib rancher, and you also have etc rancher. You can do rm-rf rancher, so that's gone. Similarly here you can do user local bin K3s uninstall. So on the master machine it's K3s-uninstall. On the worker nodes it's K3s-agent-uninstall. Okay, that's done. rm-rf var lib rancher and then etc rancher. Cool, and that's done. Let's also destroy all our machines. Vagrant destroy -f. Cool. I think that's all I wanted to show you. So this is very lightweight, easy to use. So K3s, and please give this a try. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to help you. And if you like this video, please share it with your friends. In my next video, I'm planning to do K3d, which is an API layer. So you can use K3d, which uses K3s underneath. But everything will be deployed as Docker containers. So similar to kind Kubernetes in Docker, which I done long ago, running all your Kubernetes worker nodes in Docker containers. So similar to that, we can use K3s and run them all inside a Docker container on the same machine. So that's what I'm going to explore in my next video. So stay tuned, and thank you so much for your time watching this video. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye bye.